things that we were talking about, and then I'm going to go into a different topic. Because obviously, I'll have to think about it for future years. If you have a whole course in Kashrut, I'm sure you cover it by other teachers. So I don't know, but I'm not covering everything. I'm just last week I covered some basics, and I have some more basics to cover for around half of the class today, and then I'll go on to another half topic. What I want to talk about again is I want to review two things again, and I'm going to give you two terms that I used last week, and I'm going to repeat them and illustrate them a little bit more. Term number one is Eino Ben Yomo. Well, Ben Yomo or Eino Ben Yomo. These are either Ben Yomo or not a Ben Yomo. And term number two is No Same Tam, Bar No Same Tam, which is abbreviated not bar not, because no same time is not bar not. And the thing to know is, Ben Yomo and Eino Ben Yomo is relevant not only for meat and milk, but even kosher and treif. Not bar not is a concept that only applies to meat and milk, and it does not apply to kosher and treif. So now let's give a few illustrations of that. We went over it last week, but I want to start with some illustrations. Let's first illustrate Eino Ben Yomo or Ben Yoma. Let's assume you have a treif pot. The pot is treif. Bacon was cooked in the pot. And now you're cooking something kosher in the pot. So it could be a treif pot, bacon, or maybe it's a fleshik pot, and now you're cooking something dairy. And the pot was not kashrut. So I'm not allowed to use it, that's for sure, but what is the status of the food that is cooked in a non-kosher pot? Or what is the status of dairy that is cooked in a fleshik pot? Or what is the state of meat stuff that's cooked in a fleshik, in a milchik pot? So here, what's very critical to understand is that if it is more than 24 hours since the treif was cooked in the pot, the taste that is absorbed in the pot is considered to be rancid and unfit for eating. Therefore, whatever it gives into your food, into your milchik or into your fleshik, is treated as inedible taste, and therefore you are allowed to eat the food. Okay, so again, this is a very, very important rule. Even if a pot is mamash treif, if more than 24 hours have elapsed since the treif was cooked in that pot, any food you cook in that pot can be eaten. Now again, you're not allowed to use the pot, but if you use the pot or someone else used the pot, you are allowed to eat the food even l'chatchila. You don't have to be machmer at all after the fact. So Eino Ben Yomo just means the pot is not within 24 hours of its prohibited use. If, on the other hand, it is a Ben Yomo, in other words, it was used with treif within 24 hours, or you cooked meat in the pot within 24 hours, then the food that you cook or the dairy that you cook, again, I'll get to part of it in a moment, the dairy that you cook is now treif because your dairy is absorbed with the taste of meat, and the taste is not rancid because it was absorbed in less than 24 hours. So you understand, if my milky food is mixed with my meaty taste, and the taste is not rancid, I have a halachic mixture of meat and milk, and therefore I'm not allowed to eat it. Okay, and if it was chazer, kal v'chomer, I certainly can't eat it. If I cooked potatoes in a pot that chazer had been cooked within 24 hours, my potatoes have absorbed bacon. So of course I can't eat that. But that is only if it is a Ben Yomo. If it's an Eino Ben Yomo, then even the bacon taste that is absorbed in the potatoes is treated as rancid, so I'm allowed to eat the potatoes. The milky taste that's absorbed into the meat is rancid, so I can eat the meat as fleishik. And the meaty taste that's absorbed into the milk is rancid, so I can eat the milky as milky. Right? Everyone understands the basic idea. Ben yomo, eino ben yomo, and it's important to understand that this applies whether you're dealing with meat and milk problems or whether you're dealing with mamash treif problems. Even if something is treif because of chazer or whatever it is, even meat, even beef that was not shechted is forbidden. Right? That's called nevela. Right? The non-kosher hamburger may come from a kosher animal, but it's still treif because it was not shechted properly. Okay? I'm sorry, do you have a hand up? Did you want to say something?
It's ben yomo when it's within 24 hours. So
That's correct.
Is that what it translates to?
Yeah, ben yomo literally means a son, S-O-N, of a day, meaning it's within the day, which is 24 hours.
So ben yomo, between.
No, so ben, the son of a day, and not the son of a day. Okay, that's the expression. Ben yomo, eino ben yomo. Not that you need to know it necessarily, but in poskim, in halacha books, for rabbis at least, it's often abbreviated Beis Yud for Ben Yomo, or Aleph Beis Yud for Eino Ben Yoma. Okay, so that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, before I get to not by not, let me say right off the bat, there's a very important exception to the rule of Ben Yomo and Eino Ben Yomo. And now I'm introducing a new term, which we talked about. Someone raised a question at the very end of the class. Now we're going to elaborate a little bit. That's called davar charif.
How do you spell that?
Davar, Dalit, Vez, Reish, davar, a thing, charif, ches, reish, yud, a final pay. Now you know what charif is. Whenever you order falafel, I'm sure you've ordered falafel, so the answer, do you want charif, right? So charif is something very sharp.
And the answer is
I would recommend not to, but
Yeah.
it depends on the person. Okay. And the like, right? So charif just means something that is very, very sharp. Now, there are a lot of shilas exactly what is called davar charif. I'll give you a few examples that are obvious davar charif. Onions are called charif. Lemons are called charif. Hot peppers, like jalapeno peppers, not bell peppers. Bell peppers are very bland, but hot peppers are called charif, right? These are davar charif. They're very, very sharp. Now, davar charif, it is said that one of the qualities of charif is it can take even a rancid taste and turn it into something good, like the spiciness ramps it up. So what that means is the heter, and I'll give you some examples, the heter of Eino Ben Yomo does not apply to davar charif. So let me give you an example here. I'm not going to use a knife because a knife is a different category. Let's assume, once again, I have a chazer pot, a pot that was used to cook pork, bacon. And it was done 3 days ago, more than 24 hours. Okay? I'm now frying onions in my pot. Now, if I would be making spaghetti, pasta, and that's all I would be doing, that would be the heter of Eino Ben Yomo, and I'd be allowed to eat the spaghetti, right? Everyone got that, right? But if instead of just making pasta, I'm also frying onions, whether it's with pasta or without pasta, what happens is when the rancid taste in the pot gets into the onions, gets into the davar charif, Chazal tell us that one of the things that davar charif does is it revives the rancid taste. It makes it edible. So now both my onions and my spaghetti, if I'm making, say, both, have absorbed a bacon taste that is no longer considered rancid, and therefore I can't eat it. Now again, be sure you understand this. The davar charif is on the receiving end. In other words, If you made bacon with onions to begin with, that doesn't change anything. That'll still become rancid after 24 hours, and if you cook plain spaghetti, it'll be okay. Davar charif, we're referring to in what you're cooking. If I cook a davar charif in a treif pot, then the treif that was absorbed in the pot will become edible even after 24 hours, and therefore it will prohibit my onions, including the spaghetti or anything else I'm cooking with the onions, or lemon or whatever. Right? That is what we mean by davar charif. So by davar charif, you can look at it. There'll be other applications of davar charif, which I didn't get to yet. But one of the important exceptions of davar charif is it negates, it takes away the heter of Eino ben Yomo. Now, this also applies to meat and milk. Let's take the same example. Same concept. Let's assume that I had a fleishik pot, but it's more than 24 hours since I cooked the fleishik. And now I'm frying onions and cheese for something. So I'm bedafka using milchik, something I'll talk about for parv later. In other words, it's onions with something milchik. Now, if I would just be making the cheese, melting the cheese, it would be absorbing a rancid fleishik taste, and that's Eino ben Yomo, and I could eat the cheese, right? But because of the davar charif, that revives the rancid meaty taste, so now my onions and cheese have absorbed a good taste, so now it's a mixture of meat and milk, so I can't eat it. You see? And the same thing the other way around. If I had a milchik pot, and now I'm frying meat with onions in that milchik pot, even though, and I didn't give you a pure parv case, and I'll get to that. You'll notice that I'm talking about a milky thing in a meaty pot and a meaty thing in a milky pot, right? There's a reason. I'll get to parv a little later. That's a little more complicated. So basically, davar charif is an exception to the rule of Eino ben Yomo. That's the first. Now, davar charif will be an exception to three different kashrut rules as we go along. But so far, we've looked at davar charif as an exception to rule number one, the very important distinction between ben Yomo and Eino ben Yomo does not apply when you're cooking frying a davar charif. Now, the truth of the matter is, you do have to ask a rabbi about these because it does get very, very complicated. Even the simple example I gave you is a little complicated because some have argued that once onions are frying, it's not a davar charif anymore. And you know this, right? Eating a raw onion is very different than eating a fried onion. When you eat a fried onion, those of you who are into cooking understand caramelization, meaning to say onions get sweet when they get fried, depending how long you do it. So there actually is a question in my very example, is an onion called charif? Now a lemon would be charif. Well, no, you don't fry lemons that much, but if you bake a lemon in the pot, that would be charif even in the cooking process. Onion, there's some question when onions lose their status of charif. But again, I'm here just to illustrate concepts, meaning the idea is, if you understand the concepts, you'll be able to ask questions in a very intelligent manner and understand the answers. So the specifics to are onions charif, are onions not charif, may be a bit of a question depending how long they were fried and everything else. But as I say, you still have to ask a rabbi even after this shir. But at least you understand the basic idea. I hope. Okay. So everyone understands ben Yomo, Eino ben Yomo, and how davar charif is an exception to Eino ben Yomo. Okay, yeah.
How long does davar charif last? Like if I cook a pot with lemons, another 24 hours, and then it's considered gone, or?
Yeah. In other words, that's what I meant to say before, meaning with respect to a pot that absorbs a davar charif, you will apply the law of Eino ben Yomo after 24 hours. Okay, so the fact that you originally cooked it with lemon is not going to change anything for 24 hours later. But if you cook now with lemon, it will revive the taste that was considered to be rancid or dormant. Now, now remember, Eino ben Yomo and ben Yomo is not only a law about meat and milk, it's even a law about treif mamish, right? In other words, that's why I said Eino ben Yomo could apply to a chazer pot, could apply to a treif pot. Okay, now, the next rule is a unique rule that only applies in meat and milk, and it has no application whatsoever with regard to treif. Okay, so this is a meat and milk unique rule. And this unique rule goes by the longer phrase, no sane, 4 words, no sane tam, bar means son of, bar, I don't know why Ben Yomo, we use the Hebrew ben, here we use the Aramaic bar. I don't know why, it's a good question. Bar is Aramaic for ben, okay. But in this rule we use the Aramaic, no sane tam, so literally, the giving of taste, bar, that is the son of the giving of taste. Now, since that's a bit of a cumbersome expression, so in the Sifrei Halacha, and everyone who studies for Smicha uses this expression real quick, you just call it not bar not, right? Not bar not. So if you going out on Shidduchim, you want to impress your chassan with your knowledge of halacha, you can, did you cover not bar not yet in your learning right now? He'll be very, very impressed. So, not bar not. Now again, I know I'm repeating myself. This is only a meat and milk rule. This is not a kashrut rule, generally. And not bar not says the following. It really says second generation fleishiks. Meaning, here's the following. You have a piece of meat, right? The piece of meat you cook in a fleishik pot, in a pot. So the pot is a first generation from the fleishiks. It absorbed, right? The fleishiks is meat. The first absorption of taste, no same time, the first absorption of taste is in the pot. And then when you cook something in that pot, it is the second generation of absorption. In other words, essentially, something that is cooked in a fleishik pot is a second generation. Now, if the second generation hits the milchik, that's exactly the problem we talked about before. Meaning, if I cook milk in a fleishik pot, even though the fleishik coming into the milk is second generation, but so what? If it hits milk, so that's going to be usher, right? So there's obviously no heter of second generation fleishik when that second generation hits milk. But not bar not is when you have a second generation fleishik that goes into something parif. So here's the example. If I cook milk in a fleishik pot and it's a ben yomo, so yeah, the taste of the meat is a second generation taste because first generation went from meat to pot, second generation went from pot to milk, but it went into milk, so that's going to be forbidden unless you have a heter of eino ben yomo. But let's say that what you cooked in the fleishik pot was not milchik, not cheese or milk or cream. You just cooked plain potatoes, parif. In other words, something parif that was cooked in a fleishik pot.
Isn't that just Eino ben Yomo?
No, even if it's ben yomo, that's what I'm saying. This is
I don't
Right, like,
understand.
if
Huh?
I did it right after. Like
Even if you did it right after.
The actual.
Now, understand the vocabulary here.
So
The parav item is described. First, I didn't tell you the law yet, so you can't ask me any questions. I didn't tell you what the din is. I just want to define. I'm defining a term. A parav thing that is cooked in a fleishik pot, even if the fleishik pot is ben yomo, has a name. The parav thing is. I didn't say what the law is yet. Okay. I didn't say the law. I'm just giving you a name. The name is not bar not. Now, why is the parav item called not bar not? Because it is a second generation of fleishik taste. The first generation is what the meat gave to the pot. And the second generation is what the pot gave to the parav. So the parav is a second generation that hasn't yet met the other thing. Okay? In other words, it hasn't met the milk. In other words, if the second generation would go into the milk, that would be forbidden. That would be cooking milk in a fleishik pot. But this is a not bar not, which is in a parav item. In fact, if you want to add a little bit, if you want, technically I can add one more word. Not bar not dehetera. It's a not bar not that has not yet become prohibited. In other words, it hasn't met up with milk. It hasn't met up with the opposite force. Okay. Now again, I didn't give you any law about this yet. I just want you to understand what the word means, what the phrase means. Not bar not dehetera. So here, I don't want to get too confusing with Ashkenazim and Sephardim, but let me just mention, because since Sephardim is such an absolute rule here, it's worthwhile to be aware of this. Sephardim take the position, very simple position. Not bar not dehetera is not considered, my third not, is not considered fleishik at all for any purposes. According to Sephardim, a not bar not lehetera can be eaten with, my example was a fleishik pot, can be eaten with, did I say it was
Yeah, you said.
Yeah. So you cook something parv in a fleishik pot, you can melt cheese over it, you can have it with milk, there's not obviously no waiting of 6 hours. According to Sephardim, not bar not is too attenuated to be considered to be fleishik. It is no longer fleishik. It is simply parav. Even though it's ben yomo, don't confuse this. Eino ben yomo is another heter. This is even if it's ben yomo mamish. Sephardim take the position, not bar not. Now again, not bar not is only a meat and milk rule. If you had a bacon pot, no matter what you cook in the bacon pot, even if, as long as it's ben yomo, it's going to be forbidden. Right? There is no not bar not there. But by basar b'chalav, Sephardim take the position that not bar not is so attenuated, it's a weaker taste, and it no longer has the status of meat, and therefore parav is parav. You can eat parav with anything you want. You can eat it with meat if you want, or you can eat it with milk if you want. There is no, I don't know if anyone here is Sephardic. Okay, so you get a certain benefit from that. Yeah.
What does hetera mean?
Hetera means it's still permissible, meaning it didn't yet hit. In other words, meat and milk becomes like forbidden only when the meat and the milk hit each other. So as long as it's parav, you didn't get a trigger to make it forbidden yet. Okay, this is not bar not dehetera, and do not confuse this with eino ben yomo. This is even if the fleishik pot is ben yomo, and as you would guess, the same thing is true with dairy. If I, according to Sephardim, if I cooked fish or potatoes in a dairy pot, even if it was used with dairy less than 24 hours, it's a not bar not, and I can eat the fish with meat. Of course, eating fish with meat is another problem, right? You got to wash your mouth, etc. Okay, but that's a sakana issue. Whatever, potatoes, vegetables, whatever it is treated as parav. The fish is parav, the vegetables are parav, the potatoes are parav, and the like. Now this is Sephardim, right? Be sure you make a note of that. This is not for Ashkenazim. Ashkenazim will be a little more complicated, but this is the psak for Sephardim. Now, Ashkenazim, based on the Ramah, that is the posek for Ashkenazim, right? Sephardim will follow the decisions, I'm oversimplifying, but basically of the Shulchan Aruch, which is Rav Yosef Karo. And in the Shulchan Aruch itself, Rav Moshe Isserles, in the generation afterwards, wrote comments which give you the difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So if you open up a volume of Shulchan Aruch, you'll see both Rabbi Yosef Karo in block letters and the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, in Rashi script. And as a general simplification, Sephardim will follow the block letters of Rav Yosef Karo, and Ashkenazim will follow the Rashi script letters of Rav Moshe Isserles. Again, not always, but this is the general rule that's normally followed. Of course, in many cases, the Ramah does not argue with the Rav Yosef Karo, so there's no divergence. But the Ramah does say for Ashkenazim, we are a little stricter by not bar not. And here's what we say. We also have a principle of not bar not. So if the potatoes were made in a fleishik pot, there are going to be some leniencies, but it's not total. You're not allowed to mix the potatoes. Mamish, mix the potatoes with butter. In other words, again, the case is, I cook potatoes in a fleishik pot. It's a not bar not deheter. Everyone understands, right? So the chumrah of the Ramah is, I cannot take the potatoes afterwards and mix them with butter or cottage cheese, but I don't have to wait 6 hours. So that's a pretty big leniency, even if it's ben yoma, which means, once again, the difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim by a not by not would be this. If I cook potatoes in a fleishik pot, that's a ben yoma. According to Sephardim, I could take those potatoes and mix them with butter or cottage cheese. According to Ashkenazim, I'm not allowed to mix them with butter or cottage cheese. I cannot mix them and eat them directly with milk. But after I finish the potatoes, I'm allowed to have milk or ice cream without waiting 6 hours. Which means, both like Rav Yosef Karo and the Ramah, there is a significant leniency called not bar not deheter. It's a very important leniency in the laws of milk and meat, but Sephardim are a bit more lenient than Ashkenazim. Okay? The difference would be that according to Sephardim, I could mamash eat it with milk at the same time. According to Ashkenazim, I don't have to wait 6 hours. I don't have to wait at all, really. In other words, I could finish the potatoes. In fact, one could even say, possibly I could even have a glass of milk while I'm eating the potatoes. That's not so clear. But certainly after I finish the potatoes, I could have ice cream for dessert. Milk ice cream for dessert. And there wouldn't be any problem even for Ashkenazim. And this is talking about if it's a ben yoma. Now, if it's both a not bar not and an eino ben yoma, let's say it's a combination of both leniencies, meaning to say, I'm cooking something parev and it's eino ben yoma, so then even Ashkenazim, you can take the parev thing and mix it with butter and cheese right away. Okay? Not by not will have no chumrah whatsoever if it's also an eino ben yoma. Okay, yeah.
Okay. I remember the last class we learned that. Just want to make sure I did get it right.
Yeah.
So we have the oven, and I didn't use my oven. It's different than the pot, right? I have my oven, and I didn't use my oven in 24 hours with anything fleishik, and I cook potatoes, right? And I take them out.
Yeah.
Can I cheese or butter on those potatoes?
Yes. So you're asking a very good question. If I just told you, well, first of all, I guess a pot would be the same thing. Meaning, if it's not 24 hours, then for sure, yes, you can, absolutely, you can. Yeah. I was going to say it's possible that in an oven, even within 24 hours, Ashkenazim could do it because it may not absorb from the walls of the oven.
It's like a round, but it's not like touching.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. So if it's after 24 hours, there's absolutely no question.
Okay.
But there is a svara that even within 24 hours, I would treat the pot, the stove, or the oven rather, different than a pot. That would be the question to ask a rabbi.
Okay.
Okay? All righty. Okay, everyone got this basic. So now I'm going to introduce the second exception to Davar Charif. Okay? Davar Charif took away the leniency of Eino Ben Yomo, right? I already told you that. So now I'm going to tell you, Davar Charif takes away all the fun. Davar Charif also takes away the leniency of not bar not dehetera. So now let me give you a concrete example of how that works. And again, I'm going to go with just for purposes of illustration, I'm going to go with the example that onions are davar charif, even though, as I indicated, fried onions may sometimes lose that status. But let's just go with that as an example. Let us assume that you have a fleishik pot, and it makes no difference if it was used within 24 or more than 24, whatever it is. And you're cooking not dairy, you're cooking pareve in it. Pareve, you're just frying onions, no dairy. Now, normally, if you would just be doing potatoes, that would be a not bar not. And even if it's ben yoma, would be mutter, according to Ashkenazim or Sephardim. But we say, the same way davar charif can revive the rancid taste of Eino Ben Yoma, davar charif strengthens the second generation taste, so it's as if it is absorbing directly from the meat. And therefore, by onions in such a situation, even according to Sephardim, you would not be allowed to put butter on it. However, I do have to say that you still don't have to wait 6 hours, meaning davar charif is a major limitation on what Sephardim could do. It really doesn't change Ashkenazim that much. Except the only difference is when it's Eino Ben Yoma. Essentially, if it's not a davar charif, you're not allowed to mix it, and you don't have to wait 6. And if it is a davar charif, you're not allowed to mix it, and you don't have to wait 6. So the only maila, the only change of davar charif is it takes away Eino Ben Yoma, which was already covered.
So,
Okay.
and this difference
But for Sephardim, it does make a difference, yeah.
the difference also applies, takes out the meat, and it also, if I'm doing it on a milchik pot, it's going to take out the milchik.
Yes, it'll take
Okay,
out the
so
milchiks.
that's-
That's correct. Okay, so davar charif, essentially, in other words, I gave you two leniencies in the laws of kashrut. One is Eino Ben Yomo, and the other is not bar not. And essentially, by a davar charif, neither of those leniencies apply, except for the fact that davar charif does not make you wait 6 hours, which is actually an important thing to know. That if I eat onions that were cooked in a fleishik pot, I don't have to wait 6 hours, but I would not be allowed to put butter or something on it, milchiks on it, or the like. Okay? Yeah. And again, as I say, the specifics of what is a davar charif, you sometimes have to ask. It's not always going to be so obvious. In fact, I'll give you another example, which is not related, but you'll see the same type of uncertainty. I think I mentioned it, forgive me for repeating. The idea of waiting 6 hours, this is a complicated issue. It's a well-known, one of the well-known laws of kashrut that most of us observe is when you eat meat, you got to wait 6 hours till you have milk. Now, that itself is a big machlokas. Does it mean 6 hours? Does it mean 5.5 hours? Does it mean 5 hours and 1 minute? You're in the 6th hour. There are 3 variations of that. And then, of course, not everybody does have a 6-hour custom at all. The German minhag, the Yeki minhag, was 3 hours, or is 3 hours. And they tell me the Dutch minhag, wow, to be born in Holland, is 1 hour, right? And by the way, they get Rembrandt in 1 hour, really, all the good things. So there are different minhagim. All I can say is that if your family has a Masorah that fits these customs, you can follow that Masorah.
What's in
But I'm sorry, it's a tradition, a family tradition. But if you don't have such a tradition, you should go with 6 hours. It's not, you shouldn't just pick and choose leniencies. The norm for both Ashkenazim and Sephardim, unless they B'dafka have a tradition the other way, is to go 6 hours. But with that, you can ask a rabbi, well, is 5.5 hours enough? Okay, that I'm not going to address. There's also a strange das yachid, a very individual view, that 1 hour is just from the Zohar. But some talk about taking a nap. Very strange. Some say if you took a nap, kind of
I've heard also
accelerates.
chicken and meat is different.
Well, chicken and meat is different because chicken is rabbinic, but we still pass on 6 hours for
What do
chicken.
you mean
and meat.
rabbinic?
Well, meaning the Torah prohibits
Meat.
only meat and milk. So fowl, bird, and milk. Chicken, goose, duck is rabbinic because it's confused with meat. So there could have been a basis for leniency, but we generally do wait 6 hours for both. And again, there are a lot of exceptions. If you're weak, if you're number for children, where we're very lenient. If you're weak and you need dairy, whatever it would be for calcium. So there are many leniencies. This is not an absolute strict rule, but it is a rule that we try to follow. Now the only question, now we know that this only applies if you go from meat and then milk. What if you first had dairy? So we know that generally speaking, you don't have to wait 6 hours. You should wash out your mouth and the like. Now there's an exception to that though, and that is if you eat what is called hard cheese. The Hebrew term, gevina kasha. Gevina kasha is treated like meat, and you have to wait 6 hours, whatever your measure of 6 hours is, 5.5, whatever the measure is, you got to wait 6 hours till you can have meat.
What counts as hard cheese?
So the question is, what is called hard cheese? So the Ramah's definition is hard cheese is cheese that has been aged for at least 6 months. And most commercial cheese is not and you can get 6-month cheese. It's not hard to get, but the normal cheese that you get is like 1 month or whatever it is. It's not a big deal. Now, I told you, I think last week, that there were some rabbis in Israel that are so strict on this hard cheese thing that they say everything but cottage cheese and ricotta is hard cheese. They say American cheese is hard cheese. The Israeli regular cheese is hard cheese, the yellow cheese. So according to them, like virtually every milk meal where you have cheese is going to require 6 hours till fleshing. In truth, although some great rabbis have said this, in truth, it actually makes no sense to me. I mean, hard cheese is something that the whole idea is that it gets stuck in your teeth because you have to, you can get a Parmesan. If you get a hunk of Parmesan cheese that's not grated. So you see, you're going to break your teeth biting into the Parmesan cheese. So that's called gevina kasha. Any cheese that you could chew very, very easily is not hard. It's not hard cheese, right? Okay. So I would tell you to be makel. But another interesting kula, though, that's very interesting is even hard cheese mamish. Some have said if it is grated or it is melted, no longer has the status of hard cheese. Now that's a good thing to know because let's assume that you're making a pizza.
Sorry, who said this? That if it's grated and melted?
Yeah, many poskim say if it's grated or melted because it no longer sticks in your.
But the grated, I feel like.
Yeah. Hmm?
I feel like grated hard cheese is the same thing.
Well, it depends how fine it is, really. Okay, but an example would be, but melted certainly you can understand that. So if you're making a pizza and you take, let's say you're doing a fancy pizza, right? Fancier than you get in the store. So you take a hard block of Parmesan and you grate it over the pizza and you melt it. I say, at least if you melt it down. So some say that even hard cheese, once it's melted, has now become soft cheese. And therefore it would not require a wait of 6 hours. And that I think you could be samachai. Maybe you're correct. Maybe if you just grated it without melting it, maybe it would be kedai to be machmir.
I mean, I don't eat that cheese.
Yeah, but if you melt it down in lasagna or in pizza, you would not have to wait 6 hours. Yeah.
Does that include baking cheeses? Like they have those like cheese wafer cracker thingies?
For baking, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. In other words, once it's because it gets melted, it gets desolidified, so it's no longer considered to be hard cheese. Ricotta, cottage cheese, that for sure is soft cheese by definition. That you certainly don't have to wait 6 hours for. Okay, so that's kind of that business. So the point, the only reason I thought of it has nothing to do with our topic directly, is that the same way that a davar charif might stop being a davar charif when it gets sweetened and caramelized. So hard cheese might not be hard cheese when it gets melted down. It's kind of an analogy in that particular.
So what would be an example, like the knife thing with a raw onion?
Okay, so now, okay, very good. Right, so now that's a third use of davar charif, which is a separate rule. In other words, I gave you 2 rules today, right? I gave you, we reiterated the din of ben yomo and eino ben yomo, and davar charif is an exception to that. And then we talked about not bar not, and davar charif is an exception to that, although you still don't have to wait 6 hours, okay? Now I'm going to give you a third rule, in which davar charif is also an exception. And the third rule is another leniency in the laws of kashrus. And the leniency of the laws of kashrus is that normally taste does not transfer without a medium of heat. Right? This is maybe the most important rule of kashrus. If I put something in a non-kosher pot, or if I cut something with a non-kosher knife, or a non-kosher fork, or whatever it would be, if everything is cold, there's no transfer.
So it's like a cliche me?
Well, it's more than a cliche. It's cold. In other words, there's no heat at all. Meaning, what is the rule if my mother has non-kosher utensils, and I cut up, or she cuts up, apples, cucumbers, peppers, and the like, pineapple. These are all not charif. Am I allowed to eat fruit and vegetables, or even meat and fish if they're cold, that were cut up with non-kosher implements or put, not cooked in pots, but put on non-kosher plates? The halacha is yes, because without heat, the absorbed treif in a utensil does not go out. You need
heat on both sides. So even if it was
well, yes. I mean, the food. Yeah, the food has to be hot. Meaning,
not the food that was used before.
Right. Yeah. Well, you needed heat for the fork to absorb,
and then you need
heat for it to give out. You needed heat on both sides. Yeah, I mean, you need heat on both sides. Yeah. Okay, so that's a fundamental rule. There is no transference of absorbed treif or absorbed meat. Same thing with fleishik milk, right? If you took a fleishik bowl and you poured cold milk and cereal in a fleishik bowl, even if it's ben yoma, which was used with hot fleishik soup 2 hours ago, the halacha is the milk and the cereal, it can be eaten. Because without heat, it absorbed the soup through heat, but without heat on the milk, it doesn't give out, right? So that's a fundamental rule, right? This is kind of the king of the kashrus rules, that you need heat as a medium for the transfer of treif or basar, meat or milky taste. Now, an exception, davar charif, well, it takes away everything. Davar charif when combined with a knife.
So I'm just never ever going to put lemon and raw onions in my
Right.
cereal.
That's correct. That's a good idea. That is good. It's a good idea for a lot of reasons. But this would be one of them. Now, here is the scenario, and this gets us into the knife. If I have a treif knife, meaning a knife that was used to cut hot bacon, or whatever, or a knife that was used to cut meat, hot, everything was hot, so it absorbed. And I now cut an apple, a banana, a pineapple.
And the knife is still hot?
No. Now everything's cold. Now everything's cold, and I cut an apple, a pineapple, a banana, a tomato, a bell pepper, not a jalapeno pepper. Everything's kosher. I can eat it. Because without heat on the part of the food, it doesn't give out. But if I cut an onion, now this is a raw onion, if I cut an onion with a treif knife, So we say, now, this is a combination of two things. It's called davar charif, coupled with, that's what you need two factors for this one. Duchka, this is Aramaic. Duchka desakina. Duchka desakina, docha, pressure of the knife. So this is two things, which means actually, I have good news for you. You actually can put onions in your breakfast cereal because it will not.
Thanks, now it will.
That's correct. So because even a davar charif does not cause absorption from cold unless there's also pressure of a knife. Meaning,
put a hole on.
the concept is when I cut the onion, so there's pressure coupled with charifut, with sharpness, that draws out the taste.
Is this like science?
And then, of course, even if it's Eino Ben Yomo, because once you have that rule, you will apply it to even Eino Ben Yomo based on the other rule. Is it science? That's a very good question. There have been different scientific studies that have not always been able to confirm all of
Also,
this.
what's the opposite
But
of cutting with pressure?
No, the opposite is when you're not cutting, meaning,
So you put a
let's
whole
assume let's assume I cut up my onions with a parav knife, okay? And then I throw them into a fleshik bowl. Just because it's a davar charif, that's not going to cause absorption.
The knife.
Right. It has to be that the knife is fleshik.
Uh,
Or some will say if the cutting board, it's interesting.
The cutting
If the
board
knife
that
is
has pressure.
fleshik, for sure the onions are fleshik. Now, interesting question. What if you use a parav knife to cut onions on a fleshik cutting board? So some say that's also called a pressure that makes the onion right. That makes the onions fleshik.
It's true.
Yeah. Because that's the pressure. Okay. Now, even here, you don't have to wait 6 hours, but it is fleshik that you can't mix it with butter or cheese.
But then the bowl that you throw it in is not.
Say again.
Then the bowl that you throw that onion in is not considered fleshik.
The bowl that you, I'm sorry, that you throw the onion. Yeah, it's not going to. That's correct. It's not going to be fleshik. That's correct. Yeah.
Saying if you cut an onion with a treif knife.
So that would also mean, okay, very good. Now, that would also mean if you cut an onion with a treif knife, the onion is treif. That's correct. You have to throw it away because the same way that, and even if it's Eino Ben Yoma, because you see, you're combining the rules. I already told you that davar charif doesn't have the heter of Eino Ben Yoma, and the third chiddush is even without heat, it conducts its taste via the idea of pressure. So these are three davar charif rules. We lose three benefits with davar charif. We lose the benefit of Eino Ben Yomo. We lose the benefit, at least partially, of not barnat. And we lose the benefit of absence of heat, right? Absence of heat normally does not create a kashrut problem. By a davar charif it will, but only if there's pressure from the knife or from the board upon which you're pressing down. Yeah.
So is that's the thing with the pressure in the knife?
Yeah, duchka de sakina. It's Aramaic. Duchka, Dalet Vav Ches Kuf
Does
Aleph.
that come from the same idea of when you're shechtering an animal? It's fine if you shechter it with a single slice, but the minute you put pressure, that's when it becomes treif.
That's correct. Well, it's not the same rule, but it's the same motion.
Okay, the same
pressure.
motion, but it doesn't come from the same idea of like if you put down a pressure, it could cut the animal. There's nothing to do with like if you put pressure down, you cut like nothing to do with that.
Well, here the problem of the pressure is it brings out the taste in the knife into the onion.
It
brings
out the taste. Yeah.
And then I'm not sure if she just asked this, but
Yeah.
so let's say you have a fleshik cutting board, part knife with an onion. Does the knife touching the onion that's touching the cutting board?
Okay, so that's a
does it
good question.
become-
So we basically said a parav knife cutting onion on a fleshik cutting board, so the onion is fleshik.
So does that
Right.
make
So the
that
question
doesn't-
is, has your parav knife cutting this fleshik onion, has your parav knife become fleshik? Excellent question, and that is a huge machlokas. That's a huge machlokas.
Great.
In other words, the machlokas is, does the davar charif go back into the knife? In other words, until
Still
now we
pressure.
were discussing the davar charif absorbing from the knife. You're raising the question, can the davar charif give back
Because there's
into
pressure
the knife?
still on
Yes,
it.
with the pressure. So that's a machlokas achronim. Some achronim are lenient on it, and they say the knife is parif, it remains parif. Others will treat the knife itself as being
What's like
fleshik.
the majority of things?
I think most are machmir, because the
Okay.
Magen of Ram is machmir, but some rabbanim will be makel if there are extenuating circumstances and the like. Okay, so this is again, the laws get complicated, but they are based on not that many principles really. In other words, what happens basically is you have 5 principles, and what happens is they get combined in different ways. So different shilas will be combinations of these different principles. You just have to sort it out. So there isn't that much to know, but it does get confusing because you got to combine them all at the same time. Okay? Yeah.
Just for the sake of my notes, could you please recap all the laws that we've gone through?
Well, mention the principles. Right?
Yeah, the principles.
Oh, okay. So what we did today, we talked about principle number 1 is ben yomo versus eno ben yomo. Principle number 2 is not barnat lehetera. Principle number 3, I didn't have a Hebrew phrase for it. I just said
Is it not by not? It's like how to
not barnat is not as an abbreviation. Nun tes,
Yes.
and then beis reish bar, and then nun tes. Not barnat, which is no saying tam, bar no saying tam.
Flavor, that's not good.
And the third principle simply is the need for heat as a conductor of taste. And then,
What is that in Hebrew?
I didn't give you a Hebrew one. There's no particular Hebrew phrase for that. That's just kind of understood.
Well, the nice thing is,
And then I had mentioned davar charif. We had mentioned 3 rules about davar charif that qualify those 3 rules. One is davar charif does not have the leniency of eno ben yomo. Number 1. Number 2, davar charif does not have the complete leniency of not by not, although it's still true you don't have to wait 6 hours. And number 3, davar charif with duchga de sakina, maybe that's not, davar charif with pressure of a knife does conduct treif or meat or milk even without heat.
Thank you.
Okay? So that's kind of a summary of some of these laws of kashrut. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that when you set up a kosher kitchen, your goal is to avoid a lot of these problems. Meaning, I'm giving you all sorts of scenarios. What happens if things get mixed up? Okay? But ideally, you don't want to be in a situation where things get mixed up and you have to ask questions. So what you should do when you set up a kitchen is actually much stricter. Because I'm telling you what happens when things go wrong. But ideally, it's better not to have things go wrong, right? So that's why sometimes I know some teachers don't like to teach women all of these details because they're afraid, women will be running the kitchen and they'll have mixed milchiks and fleishiks and cook everything together because, not by not and ain't ben yomo and everything is okay. I mean, it's good to know, I think, that at the end of the day, you don't have to commit suicide if things got mixed up because a lot of times, after the fact, things will be okay if they got mixed up. But still, I do want to emphasize that one should strive very much to have as much of a separation between meat and milk as is possible, so that way these accidents aren't going to happen because they're subtle. It's very easy to do something that would be catastrophic in the kitchen, like little things can make a difference, so you want to avoid all of those problems. So that's why, you might be hearing in another class about how to set up a kosher kitchen, and it may sound very different than what I'm saying, but it's not really a contradiction, because I'm kind of giving you the principles, but when you set up a kitchen, we kind of go beyond that principle. Just like in the Army, there's a rule, I think in the U.S. Army, that your your gas tank always has to be 3/4 full. Why is that? I don't need 3/4 of a tank because you never know. Because if you can have your tank go to the bottom, it's happened to me before. I tell you, it's scary. I still have almost nightmares about this. I had borrowed somebody's car, and in the middle of a very super busy highway, the car just stopped. And I didn't know what happened. I didn't realize what happened. I don't know if the engine failed or whatever it is. And I mean, the cars are going around, whatever. It's the scariest thing in the world, because any car going just ram you, And I somehow had to get out of the car, whatever it was. But what happened was, I thought the engine blew it. The gas tank did you ever drive in a completely empty tank? It's just, cars actually stop at some point. Usually you can drive on fumes for a while, but there are times that a car will stop. And that's what happened. I literally,
That's so scary.
yeah.
That's what happened. Did the car get destroyed?
I was thinking the car was going to get destroyed. There was another, but Baruch Hashem, police came and they towed it, whatever it is. They towed it to the side of the road.
That's my worst fear.
I don't know why I didn't know that. I just didn't. You see the indicator light, but you figure you have 10 miles or 20 miles. It just stopped.
That's my worst fear. Because my dad, he likes to wait until the last minute to get gas.
Yeah.
And it scares me so much. When the light turns on,
Yeah, well, it's good. So that's right. So the Army has a rule. You must have 3/4 of a tank at all times. If your tank is below 3/4, you have to get it full. That's what they said. Okay. Alrighty, so I think that's more or less what I wanted to cover with Meet and Note. I hope you understand the general ideas and also kashering. And when we talk about toveling, again, just to repeat, toveling kalim is not a kashrus issue. Again, it's important to conceptualize that. There is a chiyuv on a person that your pots and your pans that are made of metal or glass need to be immersed in a mikveh only if you bought them from a goy. If they were made by a Jew, you don't have to. But, and you're mechuyev, you have to do this. It's very true. It is a mitzvah d'oraisa to take your kalim to a mikveh. But the food and soup and liquid that is made in those pots is not treif. So as a result, if your mom made you something in a kosher pot that was not taken to a mikveh, you are allowed to eat that food. Okay, people get confused sometimes because they think if it wasn't tovel, they look at it as a kashrus problem. It is not a kashrus problem. It's a mitzvah to be tovel, but it does not render the food not kosher in any way, even the chatchila.
So, but would it help, let's say it's already been cooked in, would it help to tova afterwards?
Well, you have
for
to
the
be
next time?
Yes, well, you have to do that. Yeah, just because it was used, that doesn't exempt you from being tovel. You have to be tovel. All I'm saying is, you don't have to refrain eating the food until you're tovel. You have to be tovel. That's one thing. Now, an interesting issue about being tovel, I don't know if I mentioned this yet. Sometimes, I didn't see it here particularly, but I think I've seen it in New York. Stores from neighbors like Crown Heights and Borough Park, they sell pre-tovel. They say they were already tovel everything that in the store. So you buy something in the store, they already took it to the mikveh. So that sounds really nice and that sounds really convenient. But I do have to tell you, there's a very, very serious shaila if that is a valid immersion. Because here's the reason. The chiyuv of being tovel, pots and pans, are things that are held for food preparation. Or food eating. So if I own a pot, I use it for cooking. When a store owns a pot, the store is not using the pot for cooking. The store is using the pot for merchandise. As a result, it's not yet in a situation. See, where they have the right to be tovel. Now, if it would work this way, if I buy the pot, and after I buy it, the store then says, we will do you the favor, we have a mikveh in the store, and we will tovel it for you. That would actually be okay, because as soon as I buy it, it now becomes a pot that's going to be used for cooking, so the store can be my shaliach to be tovel. But when the store is tovel before somebody bought it, it's not yet, the technical term is, it's not yet a kli seudah. It is not yet a vessel that is used for eating or food preparation. Remember, either eating or food preparation. So one has to raise a question, Taka. One has to raise the question, because a lot of these stores actually have a mikveh in the store. Have you ever seen that? You go in New York, they actually have a mikveh in the store itself, not for people, but a mikveh for utensils and the like. So you have to be aware of that. Now, another issue is, well, a few issues. Number one, you cannot be tovel kalim on Shabbos or Yom Tov, even if there's an Erev, so you're not carrying, but rabbinically, it's prohibited to be tovel kalim on Shabbos or Yom Tov.
Because you're prepared to cook with it?
Well, the reason is because that's called fixing them, meaning under Torah, you're not allowed to fix a utensil, so they look at immersion as fixing it because now you've made it ready to be used. And another thing that's important is that a child below bar or bas mitzvah, this I think a lot of people make a mistake about. A child below bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah for a girl cannot be tovel kalim. So if I have, because they can't be a shaliach for me, meaning I can't send my 10-year-old. And my guess is a lot of people make a mistake here, because like this, if I'm chayev in a mitzvah and I'm having somebody else do it, they're acting as my shaliach.
Right.
A katan below bar mitzvah cannot be a shaliach because he's not yet obligated in the mitzvah. Right. So as a result, just like a katan cannot make kiddush for me, I can't have my son make kiddush, even if he has a beautiful voice. I can't have a son cannot make havdalah for his mother if he's not bar mitzvah. He can't blow shofar. So too, he can't do my obligation for me. So you have to be careful that if you're sending your kids to be tovel, they have to be either a 12-year-old girl or a 13-year-old boy. A katan cannot be tovel. And again, my guess is that there are a lot of people just don't think about that, and that's a problem. That's an invalid immersion of the kalim. Now, the laws of mikveh themselves are complicated, so let's talk about this a little bit. What about, now this is nogeya kalim, but it's also nogeya even people, a nida, whatever it would be. Let's assume you're in a place that doesn't have a regular kosher mikveh. You don't have a regular kosher mikveh.
Go to a lake.
Right. So is a lake good? Is a river good? Is an ocean good? Now this could be in two different scenarios. One could be I got to tovel my pots and pans, and the other is if a woman is a nida and she's forbidden to her husband, can she go into a lake? Can she go into the ocean? Can she go into a river? And in other words, it's nogeya both. It's relevant both to the pots and the pans, and it's relevant to a woman. And for a man as well. If the man goes to the mikveh, but for the man generally it's not an obligation, so it's not as important a question. So here is the basic problem. The basic problem is that the mikveh has to be, number one, a natural collection of water, either as a spring, a gushing spring, subterranean spring, and the Hebrew word for spring is mayan, just like Mayanot, right? So Mayanot, springs, right? Or it could be a gathering of rainwater from the rain, which is called mikveh.
But
right?
it can't be a man-made lake.
So it can't be man-made. Now, stop right here. You may be asking me a question. Wait a second. I don't know if you ever had a chance to inspect the mikveh. But a mikveh is absolutely a bathtub. They have a spigot, they have a faucet, they fill it up and they drain it, and they fill it up and they drain it. Every mikveh you're ever going to go to is man-made water that goes through pipes. So how can I make the statement that a mikveh has to be natural water, not man-made? The answer is, and maybe this might surprise you, that everybody who goes to the mikveh is going to the fake mikveh and not the real mikveh. Because here is the way it works. There is a rule that once you have a kosher mikveh, any water that's connected to a kosher mikveh becomes kosher. Now, when you build a mikveh, the most important thing you got to do is you got to collect rainwater, around 2,000 gallons. And that can take a long time, particularly in Israel. But you can't have people immerse in that rainwater because then it's going to get used up in 3 months, and you're going to have to do it again. So what they do is nobody goes there. That's a cistern that has rainwater. The way Chabad structures their mikvahs, they have 2 cisterns. Then there's a little hole in the wall between the cistern and a bathtub. And the bathtub, they fill and they empty, and they fill and they empty, and they fill and they empty, and they use a faucet bringing it in. As long as you have that little hole in the wall. So the waters kiss. That's the actual term, hashaka, the kissing of the waters. Which means women and kalim, same thing, are actually being immersed in man-made water that goes through pipes. But the reason it's kosher is because there's a hole in the wall that connects it to the cistern of rain water that is a kosher mikveh, which means you don't actually go into the kosher mikveh. You understand why? Because it takes a long time to get that water. It doesn't go through pipes. There's like holes in the roof, and it collects. It can take a long time. And if people were to immerse in it, it would get filthy very quickly, and you'd have to drain it, and then you wouldn't have it. So nobody goes into the real mikveh. In fact, nobody even sees the real mikveh. If you were asked to see the real mikveh, they probably wouldn't let you see it. I mean, Rabbanim have to have access to check it out, etc. But it's like it's locked. But that hole in the wall is so central. If you didn't have that hole in the wall, and every night when the mikveh is finished for the night, they put a rubber stopper in the hole so the water doesn't drain out. I'll tell you cases where sometimes they forget to remove the stopper, and 20 women went into the mikveh, all 20 will have to go again, because without that connection of the waters, the mikveh is not kosher.
That's every single day.
Every single day they have to take out the stopper, and then they plug it back in. No, in the olden days, the different in the olden days they let the mikvahs be dirty. They just let the wash. They just kept the water. It was used and used and used. In
we
fact,
saw mikvah.
Yeah. A lot of mikvahs. See, the problem was in the United States, people became more fussy and people stopped using mikvahs, so they had to develop mikvahs that were much cleaner and nicer than in the old country. Now let's go back to lakes. So there is a concept indeed that a mikvah must be natural water, except we have this rule of hashaka that helps us. But that would mean a man-made lake would not be kosher. A natural lake.
What does it mean? Mainly means that the lake was built or that the water was put in?
Well, that's what it means. In other words, there was no lake there. They built a hole and then they piped in water.
But what if now the majority is rainwater?
So you're correct. If a majority was rainwater, it might become okay, but you never know. Usually it's not going to be majority rainwater. If it was man-made, they're pumping in water. Now, with rivers, however, there's another problem. So lakes, you have to know, is it man-made or natural? Natural is okay. Man-made is not okay. Now, with rivers, you have another problem. And that is, even if the river is natural, most rivers are natural, but there's another halacha. that a mikveh must be stationary water and not moving water. And rivers are moving water, but that's only true if it's a rainwater configuration. But if it's a subterranean spring, it could even be moving. So as a result, in a river, you have to know, is a majority of the water from a spring, in which case, even if it's moving, it's a kosher mikveh, or is a majority of the water from the rain, in which case, if it's moving, it would not be a kosher mikveh. And this depends on the time of year. So during the dry season, the mikveh is kosher because you assume, the river is kosher because you assume most of the water is from the springs. In the rainy season, maybe not. Okay, so those are going to be questions that you have to ask. And again, hopefully a Rebbe will be able to give you some advice about that. Okay, so that's kind of the laws of mikveh. But as I say, in our mikvahs, actually nobody is going to the mikveh. We're going to the fake mikveh, but we have the rule of hashaka. Hashaka. Hashaka means literally kissing. The waters kiss, they touch. And therefore, if my bathtub water touches the natural water of the mikveh, it becomes part of the mikveh.
Can people use the Yarden River as a mikveh?
So once again, it would depend on the time of year, meaning to say,
It's usually not
during-
rainy.
during the rainy months, you might not be able to use the Yarden because if most of the water is from the rain, it's moving. But in the summer, now you could. Actually, right now, you would be allowed to use the Yarden River as a mikveh. Although I don't think it's that safe. You have to be very careful about that because the Yarden places has a fast current.
Rocks.
In fact, that's the issue with oceans. So what about the ocean? Now the ocean's interesting. The ocean we consider to be a spring. We actually allow a person to go to the ocean because the ocean is fed by a lot of underground sources. But you got to be very, very, very careful. Again, if your title of pot in the ocean, it's not a big deal. You can stand near the shore and just put it in. But when a woman has to go to the mikveh by the ocean, be very, very, very careful. I mean, you're going at night, and whatever. You gotta be careful because there is. I even had this experience. There is ever have an undercurrent tower? Did you ever have that? It is the scariest. Again, the scariest thing in the world. You feel you're being pulled, and you're not able to. And then you have secondary panic, which makes it worse because you panic, whatever it is. So there are scary things in the scary to say, but there are scary things in the.
I don't go in there.
Yeah, there are scary things in the ocean, and especially at night. Interesting shaila lahalacha. Just mention one other thing about ocean immersions. The halacha is that when a woman goes to the mikveh for nida, she should not be totally alone. There should be a mikveh lady, a mikveh attendant. And that's actually a halacha, that there should be a mikveh attendant. And the reason is because if even one hair is floating, is above the water, the whole immersion is no good. So you have to have an attendant who can kind of certify that every single hair is under the water. Now, the interesting halacha is what if you're taking, someone's in Hawaii, there's no mikveh, they're doing vacation, and the wife is going to the ocean, to the mikveh. Well, now who is her mikveh lady? There is no mikveh lady. It's only so the halacha is her husband. Now you do have a problem here because a husband is not supposed to see his wife naked, so to speak, when she's nida, especially. So the halacha is that he is allowed to be her mikveh lady. He's allowed to be the attendant. So the husband is allowed to, even though that's an exception to the normal rule that wouldn't be proper if they'd be at home. But once again, he also has to be her security guard as well. I mean, number one, to be sure that everything is saniyat, and number two, maybe I should call this number one, to be sure that it's safe. It has to be a very safe situation. So you should avoid. I think if you can avoid going to the ocean, I think that would be better. But okay, but if you have to, it's going to be kosher. Okay. All righty. Any questions or anything you want to bring up? Because I think I'm finished with what I wanted to say.
What's your favorite halacha?
My favorite halacha. I'm not sure if I have my favorite halacha. I have to think about that. I'll tell you next semester.
That's our last class of you.
It is the last class. Yeah. Are most of you coming back? None of you coming back? Some of you coming back? Okay. Well, anyway, it's very nice having you, and I wish you much hatzlacha. On one hand, there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, but in Sifrei Chasidus, we're often told that there's also Eretz Yisrael in your heart, which is also part of yourself. So even if you're not physically here, Eretz Yisrael is within you, and I hope it'll be that way. They say there was a famous Hasidic, not famous, but a great Hasidic Rebbe, that when people would ask him where he's from, he would say, I'm a Yid from Yerushalayim, but for the past 500 years, my family was living in Poland, New York. I live in Yerushalayim. That's where I live, and that's how we have to feel. That this is our home, and the more we yearn for it, and the more we want it, the more Hashem will bring the Geula.
So do I? So I have this water bottle. I'll use it with dairy meat. I know I can't use it like dairy and meat, but what's I use it for parve, and then I use it for dairy, and then if I wash it, can I use it for meat?
Well, again, so let's look at our rules. Our rules are that unless it's davar charef, like onions, just water, it's cold. Everything's cold, right? So everything's cold, so it doesn't absorb meat and it doesn't absorb milk. It's parve. So even if I used it with a milk meal or I used it with a meat meal, all I should do is wash it out, so there's no stuff there. Wash it out with cold water first, cold, and then if it's clean, you can use it. You can certainly use the same water bottles for meat and dairy, because without cooking, it never became fleishik and it never became milk. It remains parve. And remember, I mentioned last week that some people are lenient even with hot drinking glasses.
Yeah,
but if it's not hot, there is absolutely no question that you can use it that way. By the way, let me tell you as well that if I could help any of you by email, feel free to contact me. Some of you might have it. My email is judge5, Judge. Judge, like a judge. I'm not a judge, but it happens to be my email. That's another story. Okay, JUDGE, number five. And I have AOL. I'm embarrassed. At AOL.com. I'm embarrassed. I still have AOL. Yes. Not too many people have AOL anymore. I do have a Gmail too, but I use the AOL. That's what I use. More stuff. Okay. So again, feel free. A lot of Mayanot students
I'll email you when I put onions
email
in my
me stuff.
cereal.
So I'm very happy. So very